Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today, we're going to be tackling a topic that's really kind of reshaping the world of scientific research. It's the rise of AI, specifically generative AI.
Yeah, generative AI, it
Right.
really is a game changer. You can think about it like, imagine an AI that can. It doesn't just analyze data. It actually creates new content, whether
Yeah.
that's text or images, even computer code.
Oh, wow. So that's so
Yeah.
that's different from how we typically think of AI as like analyzing existing data
Yeah.
to, find patterns and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. It's going a step further. And some people are even saying it's like having this superpowered research assistant
Yes.
working alongside scientists.
Yeah, superpower research assistant.
Yeah.
That also raises a lot of, big questions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do we make sure that
Yeah.
we can trust the results that are being generated by AI?
That's
You know,
cool.
that's credit for discoveries
Yeah.
when AI is playing
Yeah.
such a big role. And then also
There we
make
go.
sure that things stay ethical. This
Yeah.
technology keeps advancing. What are your initial thoughts on all of this?
Well, a group of really prominent people from the National Academy of Sciences, the Annenberg Public Policy Center, and the Annenberg Foundation Trust at Sunnylands. They all recently published this report. And they focused on ensuring human accountability in this new era of AI-driven science.
Oh, wow. So this is a topic that's definitely on people's minds. And they came up with like some
Okay.
guiding principles, right?
Yeah, they did. They laid out 5 key principles to
Yeah.
help navigate this really kind of uncharted territory.
Okay, so it's like a roadmap for AI and science. Okay, so let's dive into this roadmap. What's the first principle?
The first one is transparency. And basically, scientists need to be very clear and upfront
Hmm.
about how they're using AI in their work.
So it's not enough to just say, like, oh yeah, we used AI in this study, but they need to give more
But
details.
that's exactly. We need to know specifics. What tools did they use? What algorithms? What data sets? If it's not clear what a human did
Right.
versus what the AI did, that really undermines the credibility of the whole study.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Because if you don't know, like, what the inputs were
Yeah.
and how the AI was used, then you can't really evaluate the results,
All right.
replicate them.
It's like baking a cake, but leaving out some of the ingredients from the recipe. No one can replicate what you did, and they can't really assess whether your methods were sound.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So transparency is all about making sure that the process
Yeah.
is still open
Yeah.
and verifiable, even when AI is involved.
Okay, what about the next principle?
The next principle is verification. We can't just blindly trust whatever output the AI gives us. Scientists are still ultimately responsible for making sure the results are accurate.
So just because an AI can, crunch numbers or
Yeah.
spit out results doesn't necessarily mean that those results are
Correct or unbiased, right?
Right.
So how do we ensure that verification happens properly? Or are we talking about like
Yeah.
manually double checking the AI's work?
Well, it's
Okay.
it's a little more nuanced than that. It's really about integrating AI into existing scientific workflows and using established techniques to validate the results, and also really understanding the limitations of the specific AI tools that are being used.
It's not about just replacing human judgment with AI, but it's more about finding ways to use both together and to combine the strengths of both.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like if you're using AI to analyze images from a medical scan, you wouldn't just accept the AI's diagnosis without having a human expert look at the results and consider, all the other clinical data. It's about collaboration and oversight.
Okay, so it's like a checks and balances system. Got it. So we've got transparency, verification. What's the third principle?
The third principle is documentation. It's really important to keep meticulous records. You can almost think of it like a detailed lab notebook. But for the AI era, we need to know the exact ingredients that went into a scientific discovery, including the AI tools, the algorithms, and the data sets that were used.
Okay, so that makes sense. So it's about being able to trace back exactly how a result was obtained.
Right.
And I guess that also helps with reproducibility. Like if
Yeah,
someone
yeah,
wants
that's
to
it.
replicate your study,
Yeah.
they need to know exactly how you use the AI.
Exactly. And this is especially important with AI because the technology is evolving so rapidly. A study that's done today using a specific AI model
Okay.
might not be replicable a year from now using
Yeah.
a newer version of that same model.
Well, that's a good point. So documentation is really about preserving the integrity of a scientific process in this age of AI. Okay, what's next?
Next is ethics and equity. This is crucial in any field, but especially when we're dealing with something as powerful as AI.
Right, because we know that AI can,
Yeah.
reflect and even amplify existing biases.
Yeah.
So how do we address that in scientific research?
Well, scientists need to be aware of the potential for bias in the data sets they use.
To train the AI,
Yeah.
but also in the algorithms themselves.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. Right. And it goes even beyond that. We also need to make sure that access to AI tools and the benefits of AI-driven discoveries are distributed fairly.
So it's not just about the algorithms themselves, but it's also about the whole system.
Exactly. For example, if you have an AI-powered diagnostic tool, that's only available to patients with certain types of insurance. That raises some serious ethical questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So it's about making sure that AI doesn't worsen existing inequalities. Yeah, it's a lot to think about. Okay, so we've covered transparency, verification, documentation, ethics, and equity. What's the final principle?
The final principle is continuous monitoring. We can't just set these guidelines and then forget about it. AI is always evolving. So our approach to using AI in science needs to evolve too.
So it's like an ongoing process, not just a one-time thing.
Right.
So what does that look like in practice?
What it means, we need to be constantly evaluating the AI tools and the algorithms. We need to be open about the challenges and the opportunities of using AI and the correction. We need to involve the public to make sure that AI aligns with societal values.
It's about being vigilant and adaptable. Because AI is such a powerful tool. That requires careful attention. So we've got these 5 principles: transparency, verification, documentation, ethics, and equity, and continuous monitoring. They seem like a very good framework for how to deal with AI in science.
But experts didn't stop there, did they?
They did, and they also recognized that principles are important, but we also need a dedicated body to really tackle these challenges.
They're proposing some kind of governing body.
They're calling for a strategic council on the responsible use
Yeah.
of artificial intelligence in science.
Okay, a council specifically focused on AI and science.
Yes.
That's interesting.
It'd be like a think tank and a watchdog rolled into one.
So they would provide guidance.
Oh.
And also kind of keep an eye on things
Yep.
to make sure that AI is being used responsibly. Exactly.
Okay, so this council, it sounds like a pretty big deal. But I'm curious about the specifics. Like, how would it actually work? What kind of impact could it have?
That's a great question, and one that deserves a closer look.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's maybe unpack those details a bit more. Okay, so we're back. Ready to kind of dig a little deeper into this idea of a strategic council on the responsible use of AI in science. And you had a really great question right before the break about how this council would actually work, what it would look like, what kind of impact it could.
Yeah, exactly. It's one thing to say, let's have a council, but what would their day-to-day look like? Would they have any real power to enforce these principles?
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. The proposal actually lays out a pretty detailed structure, they suggest, modeling it after an existing body at the National Academies. It's called the Strategic Council for Research Excellence, Integrity, and Trust.
Oh, so there's already a precedent for this kind of oversight in science.
Exactly.
So what does that tell us about how this new AI council might operate?
Well, the existing council focuses on promoting responsible research practices, ensuring data integrity, and fostering public trust in science. The new council would basically adapt that framework to the specific challenges of AI.
Okay, that makes sense, but what would they actually do? Like, what would be at the top of their to-do list?
Well, first and foremost, they would be responsible for developing guidelines for using AI in science. And they'd have to regularly update these guidelines. Because remember, this field is evolving so quickly.
It's like a constantly updated rule book for AI and science. But wouldn't that be kind of like trying to hit a moving target? I mean, how can they possibly stay ahead of such a fast-paced field?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's why the makeup of the council is so important, they're suggesting. A pretty diverse group of 15 to 20 members representing a wide range of disciplines.
So it wouldn't be just scientists.
Right, not just scientists. It would also include ethicists, legal scholars, people from industry and government.
Oh, so they're really trying to bring in a broader perspective.
Yeah, they want to get a more holistic view.
That makes sense. Because AI isn't just confined to one area.
Exactly. It's impacting all areas of science, which means the ethical and societal implications are also very broad.
Okay, I can see that. Diversity of thought would be really valuable. But, guidelines are just words on paper.
Right.
How would they actually make sure that scientists follow them?
Right. Well, that's where the watchdog aspect of the council comes in. They wouldn't just be setting guidelines. They'd also be monitoring the use of AI in research, identifying emerging trends and assessing potential risks and benefits.
So they're kind of like an early warning system.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
So part futurist, part detective, part policy advisor. Sounds like a pretty demanding role.
It would be. They'd also be dealing with a lot of those ethical and societal concerns that we talked about earlier. Things like fairness and equity, preventing the misuse of AI. They'd be the guardians of those principles, making sure that they're really woven into the fabric of AI-driven research.
Okay, so it sounds like they'd have a lot of responsibility. But let's be realistic. There are always going to be people who try to bend the rules or even break them. So how could this council actually enforce these principles? Do they have any real power?
Well, it's less about punishment and more about accountability and really shaping the culture of science. The council would have the authority to investigate potential violations of these principles, and they could publish reports on their findings and make recommendations to scientific institutions and funding agencies.
So it sounds like they'd be relying on the weight of their expertise and the influence of your recommendations
to try to promote
responsible behavior.
Exactly. They wouldn't be a policing body, but they would have a pretty powerful voice in the scientific community. Their reports and recommendations could influence things like funding decisions and journal publication policies.
I see. So it's kind of like they would be setting standards and then trying to foster a culture of responsibility within the scientific community.
Right.
That's a good way to put it. And there's another important aspect of their role. They would also be trying to identify potential threats to scientific norms themselves.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's a concern that over-reliance on AI could lead to what some people call a black box mentality for the scientists. Just accept the results without really understanding the underlying processes.
So they're not really thinking critically about the results.
Exactly. And that could be dangerous.
It's like relying on a GPS to navigate without ever looking at a map. You might get where you're going, but you wouldn't really understand how you got there.
That's a great analogy. The council's role would be to make sure that AI enhances science, not replaces it.
Right, to make sure it's a tool and not a crutch.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a good sense of what this council would do. But who would be on it? Would it just be a bunch of big-name professors? Well, the proposal emphasizes both expertise and balance. Remember, we talked about 15 to 20 members.
Yeah.
Representing a wide range of disciplines they would need to be. Leading figures in their fields.
But also diverse in terms of career stages, institutions, and backgrounds.
So a mix of seasoned veterans and rising stars. People from academia, industry, government. That sounds pretty good. But how would they actually be chosen?
The process would be similar to other National Academies committees. There would be nominations from the scientific community and then a rigorous review process. And ultimately, appointments would be made by the National Academy.
So it's not just about who you have to have. A proven track record of excellence and integrity.
And to ensure a fresh influx of ideas, members would serve staggered terms, typically 3 to 4 years.
Oh, there would be a way to bring in new voices and perspectives over time. Okay, that's important. We wouldn't want this council to become an echo chamber.
Definitely not.
They need to stay connected to the pulse of the scientific community.
And to society as a whole.
And to support their work. They would have a dedicated staff, providing research, administrative support, logistical coordination. They would also be expected to regularly publish reports summarizing their findings and recommendations and engage in public outreach and education.
So it's not enough to just have a council working behind closed doors.
Right.
They need to communicate their work to the broader community.
Transparency is key.
This all sounds really well thought out, it seems like. The scientific community is taking this challenge very seriously.
They are. There's a real recognition that AI has incredible potential to revolutionize science, but they're also aware of the potential pitfalls. This council is a proactive step to make sure that AI is used responsibly, ethically, for the benefit of everyone.
It's like they're saying, we're excited about the possibilities, but we're not going to let our enthusiasm blind us to the potential risks. Okay, so we've covered the 5 guiding principles for using AI in science, and we've talked about the proposal for this new council to oversee that process. What's next on our deep dive agenda?
Well, let's maybe zoom out a bit. We've been talking about the nuts and bolts of responsible AI use. But now let's consider the bigger picture. What does the rise of AI in science really mean for the future of discovery itself? How might it change the way they think about authorship and credit and research? And what about the potential impact on society as a whole? These are some big questions that we can explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of this deep dive, and we've talked about the 5 principles for guiding the use of AI in science, and then the idea of having this council to oversee it all. But now I kind of want to step back and look at the bigger picture. What does the rise of AI really mean for the future of science? Like how we do science, what it means to discover something.
Yeah, it's a question that a lot of people are grappling with right now. For centuries we've associated scientific discoveries with like human ingenuity, right? You have those eureka moments that are born from years of observation, experimentation, and then that spark of creative insight.
Yeah, we picture the researcher in the lab mixing chemicals and looking through a microscope and, poring over data. And then suddenly they have this breakthrough.
Exactly. And now we're talking about AI systems that can analyze mountains of data in seconds, identify patterns we might miss, and even come up with hypotheses that we hadn't even thought of.
Yeah, it's like having a research partner with superhuman analytical powers working alongside us 24/7.
Yeah, and it could speed up the pace of discovery dramatically, but it also raises some really fundamental questions.
Yeah, like how do we even define a discovery anymore if AI is playing such a big role?
Right? Like if an AI is the one that actually identifies the key finding in a study,
Yeah.
how do we decide who gets the credit? Is it the people who created the AI, the people who used it in their research, or is it some combination of both?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Our traditional ideas about authorship and intellectual property don't really fit this new reality.
It's forcing us to rethink what it means to discover something. Like, is it about the process, the effort, the human creativity, or is it simply about the outcome, the result itself?
Yeah, and this isn't just a theoretical debate. It has practical implications too. Like, how do we decide who gets funding or awards for discoveries made with the help of AI? How do universities evaluate the contributions of researchers when AI is involved?
Yeah, those are questions that institutions are going to have to figure out. And it goes beyond academia, too, because the use of AI in science is going to have ripple effects on society as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the potential to develop new drugs, personalize medicine, create new materials, and even address climate change.
Huh?
These are breakthroughs that could really benefit everyone.
Right. But we also have to think about the potential risks. What if AI is used to create dangerous technologies? Or if it makes existing inequalities even worse? And what about the public's trust in science? If people start to feel like they don't understand how discoveries are being made, will they still trust the results?
Yeah, that's why those 5 principles we talked about, transparency, verification, documentation, ethics, and equity, they become even more important as AI becomes more powerful. We have to make sure that AI is used for good, that it benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
Absolutely. And it's not just up to scientists to figure this out. We need a broader conversation about AI involving policymakers, ethicists, industry leaders, and the public. We need to make sure that the way we develop and use AI aligns with our values and with the kind of future we want to create.
Yeah, it's not just a tool, it's a force that's changing the world, and we have to be mindful of how we use it.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think the big takeaway is that AI is transforming science, and it's happening now. It's not a question of if, but how, and we have a choice to make. Do we just let AI speed things up, or do we use it to really deepen our understanding of the world and ourselves, all while staying true to the values that have always guided science?
Right. So as you continue to think about this, I'll leave you with one final thought to ponder. If a scientific discovery is made with the help of AI, who really deserves the credit? And what does that mean for the future of science and for our understanding of human ingenuity?
These are questions that we're all going to have to grapple with as AI becomes a bigger part of our lives. But one thing's for sure, the future of science and the future of humanity are intertwined with AI, and it's up to us to shape that future responsibly and ethically.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking, and we encourage you to continue exploring, learning, and engaging in the conversation about AI and its impact on the world.
Because ultimately, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create together.